This also covers skilled nursing facility, home health care, hospice care. So really what Part A covers is, again, your hospital care, and this will become your primary insurer at the age of 65, okay? So Medicare does become your primary insurer. That's just how the law is written. There's no way around that, unfortunately, okay? This just goes through the deductibles. Again, I'm going to kind of breeze through this a little bit quicker because these are just to save for time here. So you can see, of course, the deductibles in 2020. They pay or up to $1,400 for the first 60 days in the hospital, and then you can see coinsurance for up to all the way through 150 days. Okay, and then there is no coinsurance for any coverage within the hospital over 150 days. Okay, remember, they would be your primary. So hopefully your secondary, FEHB, TRICARE, whichever you guys end up choosing, would then be the secondary, hopefully picking up a majority, if not all, of the costs thereafter. Okay, so I don't want anyone thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have a massive bill. You'd have another provider that will pick up the rest of the pieces. Okay. And then again, this skilled nursing care, what they cover up to 100 days, beyond 100 days, patient is of course responsible. All right, and again, that's when your secondary provider would kick in after 100 days. If they cover the full amount, they would cover the full amount, or there might be some out-of-pocket expense for you guys there. Okay. Medicare Part B is your doctor services. So you go to the doctor, you get a checkup, that sort of thing. It's not the hospital, it's not an emergency, but your normal doctor services, x-rays, labs, outpatient care, home health care, preventative care. I think this does include COVID testing now as well, all right? And limited ambulance transportation. Deductible is about $200 for 2020, and they have a coinsurance of 80-20. So they'll pick up 80%. You are responsible for 20%. Again, remember, if you have a secondary provider, they'll probably pick up a big majority of that other 20% that you're owed, okay, or responsible for. And there's no deductible for preventative services. So here's what I wanted to try to get to quickly and deliver the bad news. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid, quick and easy. You do have to sign up for Medicare Part B at age 65, okay? Required to sign up for Medicare. Medicare Part A is free, so they're going to give that to you, woohoo. But however, Medicare Part B we have to pay for, all right? And it is based on your adjusted gross income, which means this does include pensions, asset withdrawals, okay? I think of anything else, yeah, TSP withdrawals, that sort of thing, 401k withdrawals. So that is counted. Social Security, it's all counted into your annual income. You will notice, these are what the premium payments are for 2020. Notice the tax year in there, right? They do have a 2-year look-back period, okay? If it's based on your income, okay, based on your income, how much you pay, you might, and you're eligible to appeal, okay, whatever the adjusted gross income they have for you, okay? So what I'm saying is if you retire within, they're looking back and have you showed up for earning more than what you would actually be earning in retirement and through retirement, you're able to appeal to them and say, hey, actually, I know you have my adjusted gross income as X. However, based on my retirement income, here's what my adjusted gross income actually is, and my payment should reflect whatever that amount is. Okay. So the big takeaway is, one, yes, you're going to be charged for Medicare Part B based on your income, but understand that it's a possibility, shocker, that they have your adjusted gross income incorrectly listed, okay? So you are able to appeal and let them know what the most current adjusted gross income number would be for you, okay? And those numbers are per month, all right? Per person. That's the last part there, okay? Medicare Part C, which I'll breeze through this quickly. It's for folks like me, private sector, okay? Medicare Part C is that additional provider, whereas when Medicare, Parts A and B don't pick up the full pieces, they would need a secondary provider to cover the rest of their hospital insurance. You can see it's run by private companies through Medicare, okay? Why would you folks most likely, in very rare circumstance, never need this, okay? Because you have Blue Cross, you have FEHB or TRICARE. You have other providers that you can use instead of Part C, okay? Someone like me, private sector, I don't have an employer plan to carry with me into retirement. I'll probably be shopping around to private companies, but I'll also be looking at Medicare Part C, because I will need a secondary provider. You guys have a secondary provider because of the careers you're in, okay, and the benefits that are gifted to you, okay. So what we really want to know is, when do we need to enroll so we don't make any mistakes, all right? So if you're retired, initial enrollment, you're already retired, okay? If you're receiving Social Security, taking your Social Security check, they will automatically enroll you, all right? So if your plan is to take your Social Security prior to 65, guess what? You really don't need to do anything, all right? Just collect your check, and they will eventually, when you come of age, start deducting your Medicare Part B premiums from your Social Security, okay? If you are not receiving Social Security when you turn 65 and you're already retired, you have a 7-month window to sign up for Medicare Part B. It's 3 months before, then of course you have the month of your birthday, and then 3 months after to sign up. All right. And then there's general enrollment, which is January 1st through the end of March. There is a late enrollment penalty of 10% for each 12 months past your initial enrollment period. That's why I'm going through this, because I don't want anyone to pay more. Whoops, wrong way? No. More than what we need to, okay? So they will start adding on 10% penalty for every year you do not enroll past your age 65, okay? You are exempt if your spouse is still working and you're covered under your spouse's plan, okay? So if you're both age 65, you're retired, but your spouse is still working and you're under your spouse's health care plan, there's no requirement for you to sign up for Medicare at 65 and until, of course, your spouse eventually retires, okay? So if you're still working past 65, which is, again, rare probably for this group of folks, you do not need to sign up for Medicare until after you retire, all right? And then I don't know if people can see this, but you have an 8-month window if you retire after age 65 to enroll in Medicare, okay? So 8 months after your retirement date, make sure you call the Social Security office and say, hey, it's time for me to get my Medicare, all right? Generally, if you have Medicare and are 65 years or older and no longer employed by the federal government, Medicare, like I said, becomes your primary, FEHB would become your secondary, or TRICARE would become your secondary. The average out-of-pocket cost with Medicare in 2016 was $3,100 for someone who didn't maybe have a secondary provider, okay? So again, not too horrible, but I do believe that most of your secondary providers will pick up a majority of those costs, okay? Again, traditional Medicare, Medicare is the primary, TRICARE is the secondary, okay? Traditional Medicare will coordinate benefits with TRICARE. That's the one good thing with Medicare, since it's a government agency, they do have a lot of communication capabilities with the other agencies in the government there, okay? And here is where you will need to go many years from now, right, to enroll in Medicare, all right? SSA.gov/Medicare, and there's some enrollment choices. Quickly with long-term care, I'm going to try to give the Spark Notes on this. It's very expensive, okay? If anyone's ever gone out, maybe talked to an advisor, someone that's shown you a long-term care quote, you might have hopefully you were sitting down before they showed you the number, okay? It's expensive. We saw healthcare costs are probably not going down anytime soon, okay? And if we're living longer, it's probably an argument that this might be extremely important. Because one way or another, you're paying for long-term care, whether it's directly through a trust or a long-term care insurance plan, or indirectly, right, through the Medicaid spend-down provision. One way or another, we're paying for it, all right? And what I want to bring attention to is how, to this point, how inefficient traditional long-term care plans have become, right? We talked a little bit yesterday about maybe getting some benefits back. If we're writing a check, we would love to get a benefit back, right? If you look at traditional long-term care, what do you need to reap those benefits? You have to be in a long-term care situation. You need help bathing, need help changing, need help eating, okay? What if you just die of a heart attack? You never need any long-term care. Hiking a mountain one day and all of a sudden God says it's time to go, all right? You just spent a heck of a lot of money to never need a long-term care service. Let's fast forward even further, okay? Different example. You and your wife have been paying for this plan maybe for 10, 20 years, all right? You've lived a very healthy retirement, and you've had a great retirement. However, those checks are starting to get a little old, and you're starting to see the tally of how much those checks are totaling up to. And you start to look at your spouse and go, are you sure you don't need to go into a home or anything anytime soon? I mean, we're paying all this. Is that expensive hotel we're not using, okay? It's not that I don't want to pay for something in the hope that we need to use it. Especially with long-term care, we shouldn't want our loved ones to ever have to go into that situation. It's supposed to be there if we need it. Keyword, if. And so if I'm shelling out a heck of a lot of money, I'm going to start to feel just me personally, some sort of way about that money that goes out every year. So what I'm trying to let everyone be aware of is that there are hybrid policies out there now, okay? Instead of just traditional long-term care, and I'm sure I'm talking ahead of the slide somewhere, but instead of traditional long-term care, there's a hybrid policy that includes life insurance, okay? So it's life insurance with a long-term care chassis attached to it, all right? And the way I look at that is, again, if I'm paying for a benefit, and we know that we're all going to die eventually, right? Hate to break it to you, but we're all going to die eventually. I know that check will cash, okay? So how it works is they take basically the death benefit amount for whatever the life insurance that you take, whatever the dollar amount is, it's all in the math, right? And they allow you to use that for long-term care services. So in the event that, hey, I died, great, family gets the death benefit, kids get the death benefit. If I don't just die and I do need long-term care services, guess what? Now I have a long-term care plan. That's what I wanted it for anyway. Fantastic. But at least if you do not need long-term care, all that money you spend over 10, 20 years goes to someone you care about. That's really what we're trying to focus on right here is efficient dollars, efficiency, all right? If someone can benefit from something and accomplish the same task, I think it's a better route, right, to go than as opposed to not getting anything back, all right? If I'm the federal employee picking up the plan, I might not see any benefit. It's possible, right? Because I might not need long-term care and I might just pass, all right? But my family will, okay, at the very least. And that's, again, something that's important to me. And of course, you guys need to address with yourself if that's something that's important to you. But this goes over the costs, okay, which is why I was saying that, hey, there's one way we're going to pay for it. And the chance of someone turning 65 today needing a long-term care type of element, whether it's a lot of care or just a little bit of care, I can't say, but there's a 70% chance that once we reach 65, we'll need some sort of, maybe it's just someone stopping by a couple times a week, or maybe it's full hands-on care, all right? The costs are going to range based on that, all right? And I was talking with a gentleman kind of before this started, and look at, of course, your family history. The thing I think of the most is, unfortunately, it appears, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but it feels Alzheimer's as a genetic disorder, okay? So again, that might be something that, hey, if your parents, grandparents, that's been a history of your family, this might be something that's a little bit more important to you than someone who's, again, family lives until 100, they're iron lungs, iron blood, everything else, all right? They never get sick, all right? It's just something that, again, we have to use what we know about our history, our health, our family's history, and apply that to making, hopefully sound decisions here. Okay. And for whatever reason, women tend to live longer in long-term care services than men. All right. So when you're doing the prices and the quotes and you're getting a number, guess what? Women are going to be more expensive than men. For whatever reason, we're cheaper because we die sooner. Okay. That's just, again, pricing of risk. If you guys are going to live longer, it's going to cost them more, right? So it'll be a little bit more expensive for you to get care. I don't know the science and the math behind that, but those are, again, the statistics. And then 20% of people 65 or older will need long-term care for at least 5 years, okay? So there's the saying we've said a million times, good news is we're living longer, bad news is we're living longer. So you're going to pay for it, like I said, directly through the long-term care service, through assets, through insurance, or indirectly through Medicaid. You all do have a long-term care program through the government too, there's a federal long-term care program, okay? And that is through John Hancock. I'm not going to go into the plan itself just to try to save some time here. But this is essentially you need to fulfill 2 out of the 6 active daily living requirements to meet a long-term care service or to be able to claim a long-term care insurance. So eating, dressing, getting out of bed, bathing, that sort of thing. Just got to be 2 out of the 6. Okay. Premium stabilization feature might be something to consider. I don't know if you guys had parents or friends of friends that maybe had long-term care coverage in the past, but over the past couple of years, because we've been living longer, insurance companies are realizing, we weren't charging enough when we started these policies. We didn't expect for people to live until 85, 95. We expected them to die at 75. Now we're paying out benefits for 20 years, 10 years, longer than we predicted. So in some cases, some folks, depending on the company, one day they were paying X. Company said, well, we're going to have to hike long-term care insurance costs, in some cases 100%, 200% even, because they had to make up the difference somewhere, okay? So it might be something to consider if that trend doesn't slow down, which, again, I doubt that trend is slowing down. Oops. So again, I kind of mentioned traditional long-term care. The drawbacks is you don't recover the premium after death. Most carriers do not guarantee their premiums, which is true. The cost of what you're paying today could change later in the future. That's obviously a tough pill to swallow. All right, and the longer we wait, it's considered to be more expensive at older ages. Because guess what? Right now we're all just trying to get to retirement, right? I'm sure this is in the back of your mind. It's important maybe to you because of your situation. But you have to do one thing first to get to the other, all right? And usually people get through retirement, figure out, okay, I can breathe, and then they start thinking about long-term care. Depending on where our health has gotten to that point, it might not be available as far as the insurance end of things, because it is checking your health, checking your mental stability, all that stuff. So that's where I mentioned, of course, the life insurance with long-term care benefit. And there are certain annuities that have an enhanced payout for long-term care, but we'll get into the annuity discussion here once we get to TSP. Here's the other way. If you don't, okay, insurance, nope, not going to do it, Patrick. Trust, nope, don't feel like paying a lawyer, Patrick. Well, the government will do it for you, but they're going to make you broke, literally broke. So if you're single, let's say you have $1 million in your TSP, and all of a sudden, they're going to literally drain your assets down to anywhere between $2,000 and $3,000. Okay, they take that money because they're paying for your long-term care service. You guys have pensions, so this works well. If you have any monthly income, you have a $2,000 a month pension. Guess what? Now you only get $30 out of that pension, because that's all going to the state or the government to make sure that they can continue to pay your medical bills, your long-term care service. All right, and you can see the difference if you're married. So in any case, you're going to pay for this, all right? It's just a matter of, well, one, what type of care am I going to get? Again, talking to a gentleman, I don't know if you guys have ever been to a Medicare or Medicaid type of facility, but some of them are tough, some of them are rough, okay? So that's also, you pay for what you get, all right, or get what you pay for. Okay, so I'm going to get into the investments there. So I didn't mean to breeze through that, but I kind of meant to breeze through that. Just to save time. If there are any questions, obviously, I'll be here after class for a little, okay? So let's get into the investments, which I guess I didn't get a chance really to check the market today. It looks like it kind of balanced out, but yesterday was not a good day, all right? And we haven't been having too many good days as of lately. So we're going to get into, I guess, some investment strategies, education on the different types of investment accounts between taxable, non-taxable, and if there's any pivot plays for you guys specifically in this, maybe environment or just your ways you can apply your personal situation. So I'm not going to do the group exercise, but this is essentially in your packets, it's what's called an inherent bias exercise. And I know in the beginning of yesterday, Chris just tries to talk a lot about the emotions, how our brain can sometimes get in the way of making good investment decisions. And what this particular exercise points to is that we all see life through a different lens, okay? And we're not actually aware of that lens, okay? And that lens allows us to make decisions or affects our decisions in a way that we're, again, not aware of it, okay? So in that bias thing, it's got a bunch of weird questions, not necessarily related to finance, but just related to asking you in a way to figure out how does your brain look when you're looking at these different situations in the world, okay? And so the purpose of it to do is to pull out the fact that we all have a bias, all right? And we make decisions based on that bias, and it affects the decisions we are going to make. Most importantly, when it comes to our finances. Because I don't know about you guys, but how did you feel a couple months ago? Did anyone check their TSP account, number one? Afraid to. Me too. So I didn't check it, I'll tell you that much. I did not check it. I knew a couple of clients of mine that said, I knew it wasn't going to be good, so I didn't want to panic. I didn't want to look, okay? Why do we feel like that? It's just money, right? It's just money. But it's because that wasn't lottery money, that wasn't casino money. That's money you worked hard for it. It's blood, sweat, and tears for that money, right? So you're going to have an emotional tie to that. Bill Gates makes a comment that his kids will never understand the value of money. He's tried to teach them, but just because of how much they've had they will never actually grasp what the value of money is, okay? And so I argue that we all have a very finite or a definitive value, especially when it comes to our dollars, because guess what? They're not infinite. Unless you figured that out, then call my number, okay? Let me know. Found a money tree. So what we try to do is, one, if you're the reason you're making a bad investment decision because of your bias or because of the lens you're looking through or because of your emotions, find a way to get out of your own way, right? That's what I did. And I'll get into this. When I first got out of school a couple of years ago, many years ago, again, fresh off the finance train, right? So I felt like I was going to be the next Warren Buffett or whatever you want to call it, the stock whiz of the day. And so at the time, solar companies were really popular. Okay, solar energy was very popular, and so I bought a company called Solar City. All right. Again, it was like the first money I had coming out of college. So a lot of money. Anything out of college when it's your first money is a lot of money. Okay. So I bought this company, and a few years later, Tesla ended up buying out this company, okay? So my shares, I think they transferred to like 10 shares of Tesla, okay? And this was maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, okay? So I hung on for Tesla for a little bit until maybe 2 years ago or so, a year and a half. I don't know if anyone follows that cult stock or not, but Elon Musk, the CEO, was a rough way to put it, looked like he was going off the deep end. He wasn't sleeping. It looked like he was taking drugs. There's a lot of things going on the perception on the outside of what was going on, at least with essentially the reason you invest in Tesla, right? It's because of Elon Musk. And so that scared me. However, at the time, Tesla was trading near $400 a share, $450 a share, which is the highest they've ever traded at, ever, okay? Me being, okay, Patrick, you've had a nice run, right? Let's get out of this thing. You're scared. That's your money. That's your first earned dollars in the working world. You probably want some of that back, right? So I sold Tesla. Fast forward to today, where they did a 5-to-1 stock split, and it's at the exact same price with the stock split of what I sold it. So I would have had 50 shares of Tesla for what it is now, all right? My point is, I'm not telling you to, oh, poor Patrick, he didn't make, $100,000 or whatever he could have made. It's because why the heck did I sell it? I knew I was young. I knew I didn't need the money. I got scared. I said, well, heck, man, that's a lot of money to me. And it's a heck of a lot more now than I've ever made in the stock market. So I'm taking it out. I didn't need it. I wasn't using it for anything. It was a purely emotional decision. We talk about writing yourself an investor policy statement. Hey, Patrick, you're investing in Tesla because maybe you want to grab that money 20 or 30 years from now. Maybe that could be your beach house. Heck, maybe it would have been my beach house, okay? I told myself that, didn't write it down, didn't remember. Guess what? Emotions fogged up this lens completely. And I was not able to make a sound decision when maybe all I had to do was talk to Chris and say, hey, Chris, what do you think? Like, should I take this out? He might have said, no, pause. What do you need it for? He would have asked me all the questions maybe I needed to ask myself, but just didn't have that nudge, okay? So fast forward to where we are now. I don't manage my own money. I knew to get out of my own way. So I give Chris and George are my partners. We set up like a monthly plan, and of course I'm involved in what we're choosing, but I have to go through them. I set that up because I knew I would get in my own way, and I probably would have gotten in my own way in April. Buy low, sell high, right? But that's just me trying to share my story of understanding I made an emotional mistake. Now, there was plenty of times I could have gotten into Tesla again, but guess what? I'm too proud at this point, all right? So it happens to everyone. Even the person fresh, all the knowledge train that was fresh in my mind, I knew what I was supposed to be doing, but I didn't do it because emotions got in the way and jaded my decisions, all right? That can happen to the person that's, again, trained on what they're supposed to do. It can happen to anyone, all right? So just be aware of it. I'm not saying I'm going to fix your emotions today. But God, for some of us that might be impossible, right? But it's to bring them to the front, to say, hey, they're going to be involved in your decision making. Make sure you can filter through those emotions to make sure you're focusing on what's the most important thing, most productive thing for you at this time. The factual information. Maybe that's talking to a friend, okay? Talking to an advisor, whatever it is, they will at least hopefully prevent you from making any big mistakes. Slowing down your thought process, all right? So where we are currently at, everyone in this room, is in the accumulation phase. And I make a joke, but it's kind of the easy part, the accumulation phase, right? Comes out of your pay stub, your paycheck. You just got to sign up for it. They take your money and they put it in, all right? TSP is phenomenal at accumulating. I love TSP. I love the life cycle funds. We'll get into the specifics of that later, all right? But the accumulation phase, again, is supposed to be the easy part because you can set up, again, stipends on your pay stub. It goes right in. It's called dollar cost averaging. You take advantage of all the dips and flows. But where everyone in this class is slowly going to start to move to is the distribution phase, right? And what I can say is there's a heck of a lot more risk or different types of risk when we're drawing down the money as opposed to when we're putting it in, right? Because, when I asked you guys, well, how did you feel, a few months ago when the market went down? Oh, I didn't look. Okay, good. You have the ability to be in that privileged position because you're not taking your money out yet. You might view that money differently when you're, okay, whoa, we're down 30% and I have to go take a withdrawal. I think of that like a roller coaster going down a hill. It's got to get back up the hill, right on the other side. If you take some of the trains or cabooses off the roller coaster on the way down, is it going to have enough speed to get back the other hill, right? So that's, again, we're going to run into what's called sequence of return risk here soon, right? So we're going to talk about a few strategies now that I have my whiteboards here, to at least two strategies to help focus on the distribution phase of retirement, okay? The hard part, the sticky part. And then once you figure out the distribution of, hey, how am I going to make my money? Where's it going to come from? What's that dollar amount going to be in retirement? We pass over to the preservation phase, if that's important to you. Like I said, some people want their last check to bounce, all right? Which makes it a lot easier on the advisor, in case you're wondering. How am I going to make this income stream last for the remainder of our lives? And maybe in a perfect world, I leave money behind, all right? So there are three phases of life time horizon. And I know it says here new risks are exposed, right? I would argue that the risks are always in front of us. Those risks are always around us, I should say, not in front of us. However, as we cross through these different thresholds in our life, have a kid, get married, get divorced even maybe, okay, right? Those risks that were just circling around us before are now put right in front of us because, again, we've crossed through a situation in our life where that becomes more important, or we're afraid of that situation because we've seen a family, friend, member, whatever, something happen to them, all right? So as you cross from one phase to another, those responsibilities and the burden of those responsibilities increase, okay? And so while the risks were all around us the whole time, the perception that this risk is more real now becomes a closer picture for you, okay? So it's really behavioral economics. Pricing of risk, pain versus benefit. Understand, hey, what's my risk tolerance? Am I willing to risk 100 grand for that possibly to be $1 million, but also for that to possibly be zero? Okay? That's one extreme example. There's a bunch of in between as far as what you're willing to risk in order to achieve, okay? And same with loss aversion. You got to be able to understand what your stomach can filter. All right, like I said, I don't think there's a single person in this room that didn't maybe feel a little queasy in March, April. Okay, a little bit queasy. So it's understanding and making sure that your investment risks are to your tolerance. Hey, if it's 50% of your portfolio is in stocks, investments, then you only know you have to panic 50% of the time when the market's going down. Okay, but that's the point, is for you to be okay knowing that the other 50% of your portfolio is in safer fixed income type of investments. All right, it's finding that perfect balance for yourself and for your portfolio. Okay. So here's the first math example. You knew you weren't going to get away without a math example. So suppose you each put two different portfolios. You each put $100,000 into the S&P 500 index fund and $100,000 into a managed account. All right. In this scenario, the index fund grew to $4.7 million and the managed account grew to $4.3 million. So silly question, right? We're all going to put our money in the bigger account, right? I think, unless you guys just like taking less for some reason. Did I go too fast? Okay. So, and now suppose you put $100,000 in each fund and started withdrawing $5,000 annually, increasing 5% each year for 30 years, okay? So in the first case, we were just accumulating. One account had more than the other. Now we're taking those accounts and drawing money out of those accounts. How come the index fund ended up with, again, still not a bad scenario, about $500,000, while the managed account had $1.3 million? I'll give you a hint. It has nothing to do with, I know you're thinking, oh, fees because this is a managed account, index fund because it's cheaper. That's not the comparison we're looking for. We're specifically saying, look at two separate accounts, okay? The managed account maybe had a little bit more active approach as to when they're drawing the money out. Hey, market's up, we'll take from the good stuff. Hey, market's down, maybe we'll take from the safe stuff, okay? Having pockets to pick and choose from, okay? Index fund, I think of it like your TSP funds all in one account, right? We talked about that yesterday. We don't want to leave it all in one spot. We got to dissect it into different segments for our retirement portfolio. But if it's all stuck in there, hey, market's going like this, we're taking money out, right? It's going through the roller coaster. So this is one of my favorite charts that we have in this whole class, and it's called, right here, it's not just volatility, but it's sequence of returns, all right? Yes, volatility is going to be a thing. It will always be a thing. But it's when those returns happen in the sequence of your retirement that's going to affect how successful or how not successful you are in retirement. So you'll see year one, right? This is one it should say portfolio too. I don't know why it doesn't, but this is one portfolio. This is another portfolio, all right? Year one, you can see this portfolio had almost a 32% return. See down here how the last year was the exact same number as year one, okay? So these investment returns, and it goes back to 1980 to 2009, so you can obviously see that was 2008, 2009. All we did is, on each of these portfolios, flip-flop them, okay? So they've received almost 32% the first year, and on this case, they've received 32% on the last year, the 30th year, all right? Notice the difference in the portfolio values. End of 30 years, this portfolio has almost $6 million. After 18 years, this portfolio runs out of money. They didn't even make it 20 years. Now, take all of the other stuff out of it, thinking about, okay, investment approach, good advisor, bad advisor, right advice, good advice. It has everything just to do with when the negatives happened in this person's retirement career. Obviously, we can, like I said, this is 2008, 2009. They had almost a 40% hit, okay, in their second year of retirement, which dropped their account value from $600,000 almost to half, $350,000. They then had to continue taking withdrawals from that $350,000, even though, what was that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years straight after that, they had positive years, and some pretty darn good positive years. All right? However, even in those positive years, because they were taking money out and they didn't have enough steam to get back up the hill, even though they had an cumulative of almost 50, 60% over 5 years, they didn't even get back to their original investment value. So of course, you know the rest of the story. There's a few negative years here, and we didn't even make it to year 18 because of the volatility, the sequence of returns. That negative number happened way too soon in their retirement trajectory, and it unfortunately pushed them to run out of money. This person had the same downturn, right? They had a 40% hit, but because it happened in the 29th year and not the second year, they're going to be okay. They still got, again, they dropped from almost 8 million down to 4.7 million, okay? But because of when it happened, it allowed their funds to grow longer and more efficiently over that time. So where the managed account comes into play, right, is having fixed cash, even like I would say, fixed investments set off to the side so that, I don't know, when March, April, May of this year roll around, I can tell you what, my clients were not taking their funds from their investment account, right, or from their equity portion, because that stuff was all down 30, 40%. And that would only hurt them and put them in this situation. So it's to have anywhere between 2, 3 years maybe, it comes down to your tolerance, right, of fixed, safe money to pull from so you can pivot. Hey, market's getting, we're going through a little bit of a lull here. We don't want to take from the stuff we know will eventually come back, right? So let's take from the fixed stuff, safe stuff. That's what it was for. So the market's down, we can pull from that. Market will come back. Usually always does, right? We know how that history goes. Just got to be patient and make sure we've planned enough over here on the safe side to ride out whatever that lull might be, okay? So that's the theory, is trying to make sure we don't take off our steam engine or our caboose so that it can get right back up to the top of the platform there, all right? So that's one of my favorite concepts, is just trying to understand the sequence of return, and that we're all subject to this. This is not, I'm not, an exception. No one in this room is an exception to this. So just be aware. Understand your emotions will have an impact on this, right? And so maybe have a coach walk you through what might be the best thing at whatever's going on in the world at that time. So one good thing you can do for yourself or for your finances is realizing if you are the problem, all right? Which is what I was able to do. So by utilizing a coach, manage your emotions, everyone has two personalities when investing. We either look backwards. So we saw, I always use like 16, 17, 18, a little bit of a 19. As we look backwards, you're like, this market's doing great. It looks like all you have to do is put money in and it's more the next day. Then anyone could do this, right? So you remove that fear, because we've seen, classic historical results and not predict future results, right? Everyone's always heard that. But for whatever reason, because we see them, hey, it's doing good. All right, this thing can't lose money. It's a true winner. And when we remove the fear, that greed develops, okay? And so where I have a conversation with my clients is, if you're in this situation, when's enough, right? Like, if we're figured out the income, we've taken care of our spouse, we have some money left over to spend, when is enough for you to just be happy with your current portfolio and the risk tolerance, or are you always shooting for more? Because if we're always shooting for more, there's a chance we could end up with less because we're taking more risk. So that's, again, towards the later, pre-retirement type setting is, hey, understand, I don't have time to make all this up again, all right? Maybe I don't want to develop too much greed. And then when you look forward, you look into the future, it creates uncertainty. I mean, this year's great with that. I couldn't tell you what's going to happen next month to the next, all right? So I could definitely say we're in a very uncertain year. And that uncertain year creates fear, and that fear can sometimes freeze us up and not do anything. I have a lot of people say that have come into our offices and say, man, I've been meaning to do that for so long, all right? I've been meaning to do that, just haven't gotten around to it. In some cases, you've got to just take the initiative, right? And try, maybe talk with someone, talk with a friend to remove the fear. What are you afraid of, right? Talking through it might help you actually make a decision as opposed to being frozen still. Doing nothing can sometimes be just as bad as doing something, making a poor decision, all right? When you make investment decisions opposite, okay, personalities cause these people to make changes, right? Like myself. Usually based on current circumstances, you tend to listen over one or the other instead of, hey, I set this account up 5 years ago for X reason. Those circumstances didn't change, that reason didn't change, all right? So again, we want to be aware of these circumstances and try to just tune out the emotions a little bit. People tend to invest for the short term, which means they take on the maximum amount of risk. All right? I knew I was not investing for the short term, so I don't know why I touched it. All right? This encourages people to take the most amount of risk. One thing that I've always loved about Warren Buffett, if you can't own a stock for 10 years, don't own it for 10 minutes. That's a classic quote he's always said. This man has a photographic memory. All right? So you would think, all right, obviously the guy's pretty good at what he does, but he also has a leg up on the fact that, hey, he can remember things, all right, just by looking at them. That man does not try to time the market. And he's said this over many, many years, all right? And in fact, he actually got made fun of on Wall Street because a few months ago, or a month or two ago, he had sold all his airline stocks, all right? And again, people are saying, well, they're going to come back. We're going to get back to travel. There's still some gains to be made here. And his comment was, I'm okay to take short-term losses to maximize my long-term gains. Okay? Because he realized, hey, I'm not going to try to time out what's going on with, specifically the airlines, but what this COVID thing is going to do to the market. I know value-wise, we'll be fine, right? We're going to be fine value-wise. So that's where, again, his approach, his investment approach, and I would say part of what our approach is to focus on, again, long-term value. When you start to do it for the short term, and I think of maybe an exaggeration of this would be like a day trader, right? Someone's picking one stock, trying to make a couple pennies here and there. Might as well just go to the casino at that point, all right? Maybe you have better odds at the casino, I don't know, because it's that hard. I know some people are successful at it, and God bless them. But it is not an easy thing to do, and long-term success is even harder to have at it. So you need to create a long-term strategy based on your own goals and risk tolerance, not somebody else's. Not your friend Sam or friend Brett that you talk. I'm not sure if everyone has like a finance buddy they talk to about stuff, maybe just shoot a few ideas back and forth. But make sure when you're shooting those ideas that person's time horizon, risk tolerance, family situation is the same as yours, okay? We don't want you making decisions based on someone else. You got to make sure you're thinking of yourself when you make these decisions, because I know it's easy to be like, oh, well, Sam has been making a lot of money at this, that, and another thing. Next time he gives me a tip, I'm going to take it, all right? That tip could lose a lot, and you could need that money sooner than Sam, okay? So that's just one example.
So it's a test.
Okay. They must have known my throat was getting hoarse, so they're like, we'll give Pat like 5 minutes. All right. I'll be hearing that the whole way ride home now. Whew. So again, that's why Warren Buffett says if you can't own it for 10 years, don't own it for 10 minutes, because the longer you stay invested and commit yourself to an equity-driven portfolio, the higher probability of success. I think, finally got a slide order correct today. And this is the statistics behind that. So that's why I said day traders, you might as well go to the casino, because guess what? The chances of it being positive, the S&P 500 from one day to the next, it's basically a flip of a coin. It's positive 54% of the time, all right? So again, God bless you day traders out there. If you hold on to the S&P 500 for at least 3 months, it's positive 68% of the time. 1 year, 74% of the time. 10 years, 94% of the time. And you see what that number is when we hold on to the S&P 500 for at least 20 years? 100%. That's not a glitch. We didn't mess that up. It's not supposed to be 99.9. It's 100% of the time. If you look back through these years in any 20-year segment, all right? So 1926, right? 1946, 1927, 1947. So that's how they found these statistics, okay? It is positive 100% of the time. I'm not saying it's up 20% over those 20. I don't know what that statistic is, but from day 1 to day, 1 million of year 20, okay, you're positive, all right? And if anyone has been in maybe the C fund for 20 years, it's possible in this class, then this is you, okay? The C fund is the closest representation of the S&P 500, all right? So another reason why I guess I'll keep tooting Warren Buffett's horn is he must be on to something. And he's always commonly said, compounding interest works. Plain and simple. Compounding interest works, okay? That's why. If you're positive 100% of the time over a 20-year period, you're going to be sitting in a pretty good spot, especially if you were stashing in some funds every month into your TSP like you guys are now. So strategies for investing: have assets invested in their appropriate time horizon. Stocks, equities, long-term. Fixed income, short-term. Fixed income, bonds, short-term. Because fixed income and equities are inversely related, this is how we're able to come up with a retirement income strategy, all right? Traditionally, when equity stocks are doing very well, fixed income bonds are not doing so well, okay? When that changes, when equities, stocks are not doing well, fixed income is doing well, okay? They're inversely related. So that allows us to come up with a game plan on, hey, stocks are doing well. We're going to take our money from this side because we're basically just taking gains, right? Hopefully, perfect world. Hey, market's not doing too well. Okay, well, that's why we have this allocated over here for the downtime, for the, not so transparent times there, okay? Have a proactive strategy. Here's the first thing. Anyone rebalance their TSP portfolios? And if you're in the life cycle funds, I don't want to see your hands right now. We'll get to that, all right? Does anyone personally themselves go in? Good for you. You have discipline, sir. I respect that. Anyone else go in themselves and reallocate their plan based on how it's grown to that point? Fantastic. That's awesome. I commend you guys because that's what I don't even have that type of discipline, all right? You got to go in, maybe set a reminder on your phone, whatever it is. The idea is, at a minimum, at least once a year, okay? What's going to happen? I'll use, this year's not a really good example. 2018 was a heck of a year, okay? As far as the returns, I think some TSP portfolios had 20, 30%, okay, if you're in the C fund. And so let's say if you're someone, you know what, Patrick, I'm 50-50, so I'm okay with half of my money being risky, but the other half, I want to make sure it's okay, all right? And over the course of that year, right, stocks did so well, it's a probability that your 50% portfolio is now 80% stocks because they accumulated so much. They make up such a bigger portion of your portfolio because they did well. That's not a bad thing. But if you stay committed in that percentage, that allocation, you're hanging out over a limb. You're more risky than what you told me at the beginning or told yourself at the beginning. So the way to be proactive and essentially do what everyone's they know they're supposed to do, right? Buy low, sell high, is to reallocate. Now remember, things are inversely related. When stocks are up and I sell those stocks to reallocate, I'm selling high. And where am I reallocating that money to? The bonds, right? The stuff that's down, inversely related. So it allows you to sell high, buy low, and keep your allocation, your risk tolerance the same, okay? From, again, day one of when you set up the account. At a minimum, do that once a year. Ideally, you should do it once a quarter, okay? Now that's a little bit harder to do. It's a little bit, again, more time, more responsibility on yourself. Okay? And I'll get into the life cycle funds. I'm just going to say it now that I'm thinking of it. If you would like someone to reallocate your funds once a quarter, you have that available in your life cycle funds right now. Okay? They do that every quarter on the dot to make sure that, again, whatever life cycle 2050, 2040, 2030, whatever the percentage is, and we'll get into that here, what the percentages makes up, that percentage stays the same and continues to move with, of course, your timeline for retirement. They're going to reallocate and rebalance every quarter. They do it automatically, right? So if you didn't know that already, this is one reason why we're a huge advocate for the life cycle fund, does a pretty good job. All right. So major features of the TSP. You have a agency automatic 1% contribution. They give that to you. They have matching contributions. So your maxable match is 5%. If there's nobody in here doing 5%, please go change your contribution to 5%. I just gave you free money. You're welcome. Okay. That's one of the biggest things I always try to press people on is please get your free money. All right. That's part of the reason they rolled out the 401 or the TSP plan. All right. That's why FERS came out with the match. It's to help compensate you for how they changed from the CSRS system. Okay. So please get the maximum match. They also have before and after tax savings. So they do have a Roth TSP. We'll get into the specifics of that. Tax deferred, tax-free investments, choice of investments. There's 6 funds in there. We'll talk about all those. The inter-fund transfers, loan program, which I don't know if you guys have ever used that, but I think it's pretty nice. Okay, it's a pretty good option there within the TSP. We talked a little bit about spousal protection yesterday, but we will certainly get into that here shortly. And then towards the end of this afternoon is where we'll get into summary of withdrawal options. All right, that's where I'll actually draw a few two scenarios or strategies for us to just take the concept with you. All right. So first things first, right now, as of 2020, you can contribute $19,500 to your TSP. All right. If you're 50 years or older, you can do a catch-up for an additional $6,500. Okay, and you can see the per pay amounts listed there. Quickly here, you'll notice the spillover method. It's effective coming this year. So I'm going to tell you something that you can essentially forget as soon as we turn into the new year. But if there's anyone here sitting right now that is maxing out their contributions, okay, you have to make sure that you max out your contributions at exactly this rate over the year. Okay, I have a few, we fixed it, but we had a few clients who, and I don't know if you guys have friends like this, so please go tell them, who will save as fast and as quickly as they can into their TSP. Because basically what they do is they try to live, save at the beginning of the year and live at the second half of the year. Okay, so in some cases, within 6 months, people will save $19,500 into their TSP, so that they have a paycheck for the remaining 6 months. However, if you do that, you're skipping yourself out on a match. Okay, there has to be a deduction from the pay stub for where it goes TSP deduction. TSP will then put in their matching contribution. Okay, if there's no TSP deduction, there is no match put into the TSP. Okay, so I don't know if there's anyone that falls into that realm, but if you fund your TSP too quickly, you will miss out on the match. All right. So I know it's like, oh my gosh, someone's doing what they should be doing and they could potentially be hurting themselves. That's why I want to make that clear, okay? Because you're doing the right thing. You're maxing out your TSP, you're just not getting the maximum match, all right? So I don't know if that's anyone, but again, please share that with friends. However, come next year, this worries me still because it's going on HR's platform. They're supposed to be involved with this. However, come next year, if you end up doing the maximum, okay, and then moving forward want to do more than $19,500, but don't mention, hey, government, I want to make sure, I want to do the catch-up, okay? Some people will just start saving more money, all right? If you do that now, you're going to overfund your TSP because they're not going to list it as catch-up, okay? I know it's silly, but it's the truth, okay? Because you have to go in and say, government, I'm doing catch-up. I'm making you aware. I'm putting extra in, part of these rules, okay? Come next year, if you save more than $19,500, they're just going to automatically mark it as catch-up, which they probably should have been doing for a while. So it's called the spillover method now. What worries me is that HR is supposed to work that out with OPM and discuss that, okay? It's going to be HR's problem to make sure that they count that as catch-up for you guys, okay? So like I said, you can ignore the old rule because as long as that's known this year, you'll be fine for next year. Nope, you'll always be able to do the catch-up. It'll just be less responsibility for you to remember to go in and sign up for it every year. That's how it is now, is every year you got to remind them, hey, I'm doing the catch-up. Moving forward, you start saving more than $19,500, they're just going to mark it as catch-up. So it's, again, easier for you, probably something they should have been doing for a while just because to me kind of seems like common sense, but you'll see here as we get into the TSP withdrawal options how they just came out with a rule that is common sense, okay? So we'll see. I guess common sense isn't always the main advocator here.
So then the per pay, you just jump that to 1,000,
Right,
and you don't have to worry about
exactly.
every year.
Which is what people do, or will try to do now, but they don't realize they didn't mark it as catch-up, so they're overfunding. But you're correct. You could just you won't even have to worry about this second line here. Yep. So again, they make it easier, less confusing, common sense that I thought they would have thought of a little bit ago. All right, but it does help. Helps you guys. So I guess this slide will pretty much be taken out next time I see you. All right, if all goes well. Again, catch-up eligibility, you must be in pay status, you have to be at least 50 years old, did not receive a hardship withdrawal, and you have to be doing the max before you can do catch-up. I know that's silly, but people do ask me that. Here's why I said, please get your free money. Government gives you 1% right off the bat. You don't even have to be saving anything in your TSP. But anything over 5, up to 5, they're going to give you 5%. All right. So let's get into the TSP choices. So we have fixed interest, we have G fund and F fund, and then we have all the stock funds. So C fund, I fund, S fund, L fund. Okay. We're going to break all these down. So we have the G fund, which contains government securities, government bonds, essentially the safe stuff, right? And I will say, it is a fact, you will not lose money in this account, all right? The dollar amount will not go down. However, the biggest risk in this account, especially in the year 2020, is inflation risk, all right? I'd argue if someone was probably 100% G fund for this year, they'd be lucky to get 1%, maybe 1.5%. All right. What do we? Is it up here? Average inflation rate is trending anywhere between 2 to 2.5%. Okay. So like I said, you're not going to lose $1. That dollar, if you have $1 today, it's going to be there $1 tomorrow. But what that dollar buys will be less. Okay. That is your biggest risk being fully in the G fund. Is if you stay too long, you're going to see your buying power dramatically increase, or decrease, sorry. Okay. And again, this is more impacted now because of how low interest rates have fallen because of course, the whole COVID situation, all right? So just be aware of that. Yes, G fund is important for short term, right? Hey, if money's there for a year, 2, 3 years, right? Yes, do we have some inflation risk? We sure do. But it's not like 20 years inside the G fund, okay? And during that time, it's serving its purpose to be there when we need to access those funds in a, hopefully not another COVID situation, but a COVID type event that drops down the market. We have the F fund, fixed income index investment fund, contains government bonds, but also corporate-backed securities, okay? Mortgage-backed securities. So the difference between the F fund and the G fund is pretty much that word right there, corporate. Anything with corporate America means they're probably trying to turn a profit somewhere. So there's going to be a little bit more aggression as far as what they're able to pay out as far as interest rates, because again, it's for profit, right? It's corporate America. They are invested primarily in the BlackRock U.S. Debt Index Fund. All right, BlackRock is a very big portfolio manager, okay, in our country, and they've done a very good job of their performance. So again, while they have lower volatility than stocks, they also achieve a little bit of higher return than G fund because of that corporate situation and their profit-driven companies. All right. Market interest rate, of course, you have risk to that because it's going to be directly affected by how the market or how interest rates and what the Fed decides to do, right? Of course, you're always going to have inflation rate. It might do a better job of keeping up with inflation, but there's still going to be that risk that maybe it just keeps up with inflation. Okay. We then have common stocks, C fund. And if you were in the C fund, like I said, a couple months ago, you probably panicked. But if you're, maybe today's not a good example, but if you're sitting and looking at your C fund maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, you're probably thinking, okay, wasn't that bad. All right, if you looked prior, now you look now. All right, we've kind of made basically a V-shaped recovery. All right, if you look at the charts. All right. 31 this year? Or today? Okay, got it. Roger. So that's good. We didn't have a good day yesterday. I can say that much. So your C fund, folks, that is your S&P 500, all right? Essentially. So that statistic I was giving on, hey, 20 years, S&P 500, if I'm investing in this, it's going to be positive 100% of the time. That's pretty much your C fund, okay? You have a 20-year time horizon, and guess what? I can tell you right now, some of your dollars, let's say you retire next year, some of those dollars still have a 20-year time horizon. We're going to live 20 years in retirement, right? So it's also understanding when I will need those dollars, which we'll get into here on the whiteboard, as far as what my risk is maybe for particular accounts. Yes, you want to have investment risk for your income, for your spousal protection, but you still need to keep up with inflation. You still need to grow some of your assets if we are going to live 20 years in retirement. We did just see the statistic on what happens when you invest in the S&P 500 for 20 years, right? Okay. So it's understanding that mentality. Much higher up than the GNF fund. And these are larger stock companies that tend to have lower volatility in situations not such as COVID or pandemic events, all right? Because this certainly had volatility here over the last 3 months. But you're looking at, again, the Microsofts, Facebook, Googles of the world. That's who you're getting a piece of, essentially, in the C fund, okay? Too big to fail. I don't like that word, but that, again, that's the type of company. And the only risk, it's hard for me to wrap my head to say inflation risk because usually C fund keeps up with inflation. So your biggest risk is really, of course, the stock market. And hey, it can be good when it's good, but man, when she's bad, okay? So it's just being understand to cope with your stomach lining of, hey, how far is this thing going to drop before it turns around? Small cap index fund, which if you've ever heard of like the Russell 2000, it's kind of a comparable index. They match the performance of the Dow Jones U.S. Completion TSM index, historically higher upside than GF and C fund. Reason being, right, is they're smaller companies. So they're pretty much trying to invest and reinvest all their extra funds, capital into themselves to grow their business. This would have been one of the leading performers 2017, 2018 because of the tax cuts, right? So of course we know, corporate America got some tax cuts, but where it really trickled down to was the small businesses, these smaller companies. Because they're growth companies, right? Any extra funds that they get that they can use, they're going to put back into their business. Okay, so again, I don't know what year that would have transcended because we all know it takes a little bit for the tax code to filter through. You would have seen a higher performance from these small cap companies because of that reinvestment and having some of those extra dollars to go around. Okay, but I think of, again, your smaller, your tech companies that are trying to become the Microsofts of the world, but just again haven't broken through yet. You're going to have more risk, right? Because possibility of some of those companies not making it, all right? Going to have a lot more risk, and because they're smaller, they can't combat maybe a situation like COVID, right? Where for whatever reason they had to close their doors or quickly move everyone, remotely. Companies like Apple, Facebook, Google, right? They can do that at a flick of a button because they can buy everyone computers to work from home, right? Because they have the capital to do that, all right? That's just one kind of example where I think small cap companies may be affected by that situation here, okay? Of course, we have stock market risk with that. Big disclaimer, everything here has risk, right? And then we have the iFund, the International Stock Fund, which contains 21 developed countries, okay? And they are invested in the BlackRock International Index. The biggest risk that we have with the iFund is because it's international, all right? And it's 21 of the most developed countries, so guess what? That includes China. And China, we have a little bit of a dispute with as we speak, right? And it looks like that's going to be a risk not only from COVID, right? Because that affected, we saw the global trade effect of what COVID had, okay? So if I had to take a guess, iPhone this year is probably not doing too well, okay? Because again, out of all the developed countries, it would be naive to say that they weren't affected by, of course, the slowdown of global trade, okay? So because it's international, because it's connected, and because our trade is so interconnected, you're going to have a lot more what's called geopolitical risk, okay? If something happens in one country, could affect another, which could eventually trickle down to affect us, okay? Or if something happens here with us, we affect a lot of other countries. Same with China. Something happens with them, that affects a lot of how those countries are going to do business and proceed throughout the year. So that's not for me to say stay away from the international side. No, we still need to have exposure. Put all your eggs in one basket. And there's actually been some researchers, some analysts that have been found some research that basically proves and supports that, hey, international funds could have a huge turnaround, big comeback. Because yes, while global trade slowed down, it was a self-driven recession, as you would. It wasn't, hey, because we don't have jobs, because we don't have this, because we don't have that, we're falling down and because the global trade is falling because of that. No, global trade stopped because we put a big stop sign and said, hey, we need to stop, all right? So again, that's just some analytics of what I've been reading, is that people do feel that international trade and their international funds will have a good year here coming up. I don't know if it's going to be next year. I'm not telling you the timing. I'm just saying there's statistics that would support that claim, okay? Which is why we always want to spread our eggs out to a couple of different baskets to make sure we're getting a little bit of all the exposure we should, okay? So again, you have international stock market risk, but because you're also dealing with currency exchange, that sort of thing. So when our dollar becomes more powerful, it gives you more buying power, vice versa, less buying power. So again, there's just more risks. There's more connecting factors when it comes to the international fund. The CARES Act. Yes, sir.
BlackRock has done very good with TSP, but do they bid on this over every certain amount of years?
Sure do. Yeah. Yep. So there's only a certain few people who can go to get those bids, right? Because they have to have the capability. But yep, just like we bid for this class, right? They're contractors of the federal government who help manage those funds. There was actually MassMutual is one of the large insurance providers, investment providers, as you would. Their whole 401k program got bought out by Empower. I don't know if everyone ever heard of Empower, but I know they have a lot of hands in governmental management. So every year, that's the game, is trying to, and especially the federal government, right? Because guess what? There's billions of dollars in that fund. So you got the sharpest of sharpest minds trying to get the TSP fund every year. But BlackRock has done very well. They're up there. I always, a few of the portfolio managers that do pretty well, BlackRock, Vanguard. Fidelity does pretty well too, just from, again, their fees, all that stuff. So, but I'm not going to get into all the different investment managers out there, right? CARES Act, which came about, you can call it the CARES Act, you can call it the COVID Act, whatever your name is for it. TSP changed an update, so they temporarily waived the notary requirement, all right? You can do online submissions of your loan and withdrawal forms now. Temporary changes in withdrawals can also still be done online. And of course, temporary changes to your required minimum distributions, all right? You do not need, again, this is rare for anyone in this class because I know I don't have anyone here who's 70, but you do not need to make withdrawals from your TSP account in 2020 to satisfy RMDs, okay? Regardless of your age or employment status. So again, that's a rule they waived. We don't need to take RMDs for 2020. TSP will not automatically send RMDs for 2020. If you make a withdrawal, TSP will withhold federal taxes automatically at the rate appropriate for your withdrawal. Okay, and you can transfer or roll over to an IRA or eligible employer plan any otherwise eligible withdrawals you make. All right, so we'll talk about, hey, rolling over, what that looks like, why people want to do it, okay? Why maybe you should do it. But again, this is pretty much the COVID slide of some changes, some things they've added. Will my installment payments get stopped automatically? If they don't and I want to stop them, how do I do that, right? So they did, again, temporary waiver of RMDs, does not stop installment payments, which I don't know who would want to stop their installment payments in a time of a pandemic, but I guess we'll bring that up, all right? Even if you only choose to take them to meet your RMD. If you want to stop receiving payments, you got to go into my account and stop your payments, okay? I'm going to go through this because this is based on RMD stuff, and I don't believe I have anyone in here too ready to take an RMD. Our 2020 RMDs just postponed or they canceled. So they are completely waived. For 2020, the RMDs, required minimum distributions, are completely waived due to the CARES Act. And then if I took a withdrawal less than 60 days ago, so maybe prior before all this stuff happened, will I be able to use the TSP 60 form to roll over that distribution back into a TSP using a personal check? So I'm just going to explain that. What you're all able to do is you're able to access your IRAs and for basically 60 days and put the money back in there without having any taxable penalty, okay? So what that's referring to, that's the rule that's referring to is in the instance that someone took a withdrawal, okay? Maybe not needing the withdrawal, wanted to put the money back in so they didn't have to pay taxes, okay? Everyone's able to do that right now. The biggest time I see that applied, because again, we know we don't want to access our IRAs, right? It's really just in an instance where I've seen, folks are selling a home, all right, okay? And so they're buying a new home, but they're selling their other home, and the cash isn't available in the old home, right? But they're moving into this new home, and they need to put an offer down. And where I've seen is you can access your IRA, obviously give them the money, right? So they have it, you take it out of your IRA. As long as you sell that home within 60 days, have that money and put it back in your IRA, you're not going to be taxed for a withdrawal, okay? So again, that's where that little caveat comes from. Before you start touching your IRAs, make sure you talk to someone about that, right? Okay, I don't want anyone going in and somehow missing this 60-day rule and you get charged with an arm and leg in taxes, okay? But that is a nice little pivot play for anyone in that particular situation. There's other uses for it, but again, that's the most common that I see. So what if I've already received a required minimum distribution in 2020, being you took it out early because you're a good student, you get your RMD done early, all right? And it was more than 60 days ago. Can the TSP extend the 60-day window? So they have extended the 60-day rollover deadline to August 31st, all right? So you can roll over those amounts to an IRA eligible employer plan or back into your TSP account, all right? So August 31st, guess I can take that off because I'm telling you guys that information. It's a little bit too late, huh? All right. So they did extend it for a little bit. What does the TSP intend to do with automatic RMD payments that were scheduled to occur either before the end of December 2020 or before the end of March 2021? So of course, they pre-schedule out these RMDs. They will not be making those payments, which are normally sent automatically before the deadline. Okay, again, because they have waived RMD payments. So another thing that came from the CARES Act is everyone's been able to access your 401k, TSP, without the 10% early withdrawal penalty because of COVID. Okay, it was to help alleviate any financial burdens. It does not help alleviate the burden of retirement when they realize they had to take those funds out early, okay? But at least it does alleviate the strain for the reason why you wouldn't want to touch them in the first place, okay? Everyone, and the biggest misconception is that people think you have to wait until 59 and a half to touch your TSP funds, okay? You can't access them until I'm 59 and a half, those are the rules, right? There is one exception to that. If you retire on or after your 55th birthday and keep your funds inside TSP, inside your 401k, and withdraw from that employer plan, you can access your funds without the 10% penalty, okay? So that's the key is, of course, you have to keep it inside your old employer plan, But for folks like you, where I see, there might be some folks retiring at 57, 58, 59, right, who cannot technically, right, access their TSP funds. Maybe that's why you've been waiting to retire. I'd be able to retire, I just can't access my money. You're able to access it at 55, as long as you retire on or after your 55th birthday. Separate from service, leave those funds, or maybe a portion of those funds, right, at the TSP so you can access them from 55 till 59 and a half. At 59 and a half, you can have an IRA, Roth IRA, whatever it is, you can take money out without any early withdrawal penalty. Okay, so I always find that as one useful hint that most people don't know walking into this class is, wait, I can get my money early? And in some cases, I've had people like stand up and, oh my God, I can retire after that note, okay? So I always love giving that news that you can access it earlier, just understand the guidelines you have to follow in order to do that, okay?
So does this basically mean if you or your spouse get diagnosed with COVID, asymptomatic or not, or symptomatic, you now basically can start taking money out of your IRA for a 3-year period? You can have it for 3 years.
You got it. It's basically a way to, I guess, alleviate financial burden. I think some of these laws were just kind of pushed out so fast because we were reacting to what we need to react. I'm not sure if they'll go back and tailor, this later or adjust.
And there's no requirement to repay. It
Nope.
just says you can repay.
You can if you want, right? They're allowing you access to it earlier. Would it be advisable to repay it? Probably. I doubt we anticipated a withdrawal of this nature, when we had set up the plan or whatever it was. So, but yeah, I mean, if you put on there, well, you can repay it, but you don't have to. How many people are going to actually repay it, right? I don't know. So, oh, sorry. Yes, sir.
So what you're basically saying that if you are 55 years of age, you move and you do like a rollover to another qualified plan, you cannot access that until you're 59 and a half.
Correct.
So in order to access that at 55, it has to remain in the same employer plan.
Correct. Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. Yep. And thank you for clarifying. I try to say things a bunch of different ways to make sure people don't get misdirected is yes. And that's why I said maybe you leave a portion inside the employer plan, right? Because we'll get into strategies and dissecting our money and pocketing money, right? But in order to make sure, because the moment you roll money to a private IRA, rollover IRA, whatever it is, your investment advisor, that 59 and a half rule comes right back into play.
What if you go to another employer and you transfer your TSP into their 401k and you're 55 and you separate there? Is that still going to be applicable?
No, because you've
You moved it over.
correct. Yep. So it has to be at your separated from service. Yep. Employer plan. Yep. Absolutely. So, which again, I think if you guys learn this, maybe some of your friends, I'm telling you, some people are going to learn that news and realize they can retire sooner than they thought, just because you're waiting in most cases, waiting to access your money. Okay, I've seen it. So please feel free to send that birdie to your friends who are not in this class. Okay. And I am just every hour and a half or so, we'll just do a 10-minute break, right? Shake it off. And we'll come back 10:43. 2:43. I was saying 10 minutes. 2:43. Yeah, see you guys tomorrow morning. And then we'll finish off the last hour and get you guys home.